Hi, I'm Venus. Last Christmas, my mom texted me, "Christmas isn't for moochers. No call, no invite. Just that." So I stayed home, ate alone, told myself maybe they just needed space. But the next morning, I woke up to 63 missed calls. Turns out the family had a full party. In the house I legally inherited, the one they'd transferred behind my back. They told people I was unstable. They forged my name. They even joked online that I finally stopped showing up. And now, they want forgiveness, without ever offering the truth. What really happened between that text and those calls? And how far would your family go, just to make you disappear? The text came in on a Wednesday afternoon. I was standing in line at the post office, holding a padded envelope addressed to Fresno, where my parents still lived. "Christmas isn't for moochers. We're keeping it small this year." No, "Hi, sweetie," no context, just that. I didn't text back. Not because I didn't have something to say. Oh, I had plenty. But because silence was louder. I stared at the message long enough for my fingers to go cold. It wasn't the kind of cold that made you shiver. It was the kind that sat in your ribs and said, "See? This is what you get for expecting something different." They didn't call. They didn't explain. And deep down, I knew they wouldn't. The woman behind me cleared her throat, impatient. I stepped forward, handed the envelope to the clerk, and said, "Standard mail." Inside that envelope, a Christmas card I'd already signed 2 nights before, with a $200 grocery gift card tucked inside. I'd written something like, "Thank you for always making the holidays feel like home." Joke's on me, I guess. Back at my apartment, the heater kicked in as I peeled off my coat. The apartment was small, just enough room for a fold-out table and a fake tree I'd bought on clearance. I stood there, keys in one hand, trying to decide if I should cry or laugh. Instead, I just turned off the overhead light and sat in the dark for a while. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not out of sadness, but because my brain wouldn't stop untangling that message. Moocher, not daughter, not family. I guess when you stop giving, they start labeling. 2 days later, the package came back. It was the same one I'd mailed early that week, a small box wrapped in gold foil, with a scarf I'd picked out for Mom, and a local craft beer sampler I'd thought Dad might enjoy. Nothing expensive, just thoughtful, the kind of gift you send when you're trying to keep a connection alive. A sticky note was slapped right on top of the label. "You're very thoughtful, but some of us already did our part this year." No signature, but I recognized my sister's handwriting. I didn't get angry. I folded the note carefully, placed it in a drawer next to my old tax forms, and made myself tea. Some people lash out when they're hurt. Me? I catalog things. The truth is, this wasn't new. There was the year I paid their overdue property taxes, and Mom posted on Facebook about how Jolene stepped up for the family again. The time Dad asked me to wire $1,800, just until payday, and I did it without question, then found out they used it to cater Jolene's promotion party. Even last year, when they handed out family roles for the Christmas dinner, Jolene was host, Greg was carver, and I was kitchen helper. I scrubbed the dishes while they toasted over champagne. I remember standing there with prune fingers, listening to them laugh about how Madeline always plays the quiet part. They were right, I did. But this year, I wasn't playing it anymore. I didn't respond to the returned box. I didn't send another message. I opened my delivery app, ordered groceries for one, and picked out a pine-scented candle I'd seen in the holiday feel section. The candle was stupidly overpriced, but something about the smell reminded me of the only Christmas I remembered feeling safe. When Grandpa was still alive, and nobody was competing for affection or power. When the groceries arrived, I unpacked slowly. I placed everything neatly, apples in the fridge drawer, cereal on the shelf, pasta aligned by type. There was a peace to the stillness, not comfort, not joy, but clarity. I didn't call Jolene. I didn't call Mom. I didn't ask why I was left out. I just listened to what they were telling me. because when people show you who you are in their world, it's best to stop arguing. Later that evening, I lit the candle and sat at the table. Not the couch, not the floor. A table, with one plate. My lasagna was frozen, but it didn't matter. I let it heat while I turned on a classic Christmas movie I used to love as a kid. One of those feel-good ones with snow and redemption and hugs by the fire. I didn't feel like hugging anyone. Halfway through the movie, I muted the sound and opened my laptop. I stared at the home screen for a while, the blinking cursor like a dare. Then I clicked on a folder I hadn't opened in nearly 3 years. It was titled Evidence. Inside, there were screenshots, PDFs, receipts, emails, scans of legal documents I once thought I'd never need. I scrolled down to one file, the one I'd buried so deep I almost forgot it existed. A scanned will. Grandpa's. The file hadn't been touched since the day I saved it. I clicked it open. I leaned back in my chair as the PDF loaded, the screen's dull glow brushing across my face. The cursor blinked in the corner, like it knew something I didn't. But I knew. Somewhere deep, I'd always known. The file opened. There it was, Grandpa's signature, faded but clean, the notary's seal beneath it, and my name spelled in full, Venus Irene Shipman. Beneath that, the words that landed heavier than I expected. To my granddaughter, sole beneficiary of the property at 118 Claremont Avenue. The house. The same one Mom and Jolene always referred to as the family place, the one I'd painted over 3 summers, the one I'd cleaned when Grandpa fell ill, alone, before anyone else had the time or the will. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Not relief, something colder. Recognition, maybe. I minimized the document, clicked over to a different folder, and began dragging files. The receipt from the locksmith last year, the invoice from the roof repair I'd paid for in cash, the bank statements showing automatic utility drafts under my name. None of it mattered until now. Not to them. But to me? It built a spine I hadn't stood on in years. And then I saw it, tucked inside a digital folder marked 2018 summer. The video. It had been taken the week before Grandpa's funeral. I remembered because it was the only time I'd been alone with him in the house. He'd called me into the living room and asked me to sit across from him. The windows had been open, and I remembered the cicadas humming louder than the old ceiling fan. In the video, his voice came slow but steady. If you're hearing this, it means they tried to erase you. Don't let them. He'd paused. You matter more than their version of the story. I sat there, letting his words rest over me like a coat I'd forgotten fit. Back then, I'd believed in fairness. I thought if I didn't make waves, they'd respect me for being calm. But Grandpa had seen it. The warning wasn't about the house. It was about how people rewrite stories when they need a villain to hide their own cowardice. The next morning, I printed the will. 3 copies. I placed one in my filing cabinet under legal, another in a Ziploc tucked into a fireproof box, and the third, well, I folded that one and slipped it into a book in my nightstand. How to Stop Being the Family Scapegoat. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown caller. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. Venus, it's Jolene. Her voice had that familiar syrupy tone she used at family events, the one she thought made her sound innocent. I just wanted to touch base about, everything. I didn't say anything. I mean, Mom and Dad were the ones who made the decision this year. I wasn't even involved. You know how they are. She trailed off, waiting for me to fill the silence. I didn't. I just feel like this is all getting blown way out of proportion. There it was, the classic line. In the background, I heard Mom's voice, faint but sharp. Is that her? Hang up, you're making it worse. And then, nothing, line went dead. I stared at the screen, still lit up with her name. I set the phone down and didn't move for a while. Instead of rage, I felt something simpler. Confirmation. That night, I opened my notes app and titled a new page. contingency plan. Underneath it, I typed out 3 items. Secure title verification, print certified copy of the will, document timeline of property-related payments. I didn't write it in anger. It wasn't a tantrum. It was clarity. I didn't want revenge. I wasn't interested in dragging anyone through the mud. I just wanted to reclaim the space I'd been erased from. Not for them, but for me. The next morning, I called the county office to confirm the deed records. A soft-spoken woman named Cheryl told me they'd look into the last title transfer. I thanked her and hung up. Then I grabbed a folder, labeled it Restoration, and began assembling every relevant file I had. When the sun dipped low that evening, I poured a cup of black coffee and sat at the same desk. The candle from the night before had burned halfway down. Its scent had faded, but I didn't light it again. I didn't need atmosphere, I needed facts. My laptop pinged. A new Dropbox notification. It was a file I hadn't touched since the day Grandpa passed. A voicemail. I clicked play. "Venus," his voice echoed softly. "They're going to try to tell you it wasn't yours, that you imagined it, that it never happened. But you know better." I nodded to no one. Grandpa always knew what they were capable of. I just hadn't wanted to believe him. This time, I didn't cry. I clicked download, saved the file under legacy, and began printing copies. Each one a piece of a story I finally had the nerve to tell. By the time the final page slid out of the printer, the candle on the table had burned itself out. I left everything in neat stacks, clipped and labeled. Then, I stood for a moment in my dimly lit apartment, feeling that strange, quiet certainty people sometimes mistake for numbness. I wasn't numb, I was aware, more than I had been in years. I grabbed my phone, mostly out of habit, and sat back down on the couch. The lasagna was cold again. I didn't care. I started scrolling, not looking for anything in particular. News, weather, a recipe I'd never cook, something to fill the space. Then it popped up. Christmas with the real ones, Jolene's profile. She'd gone live 6 minutes ago. My finger hovered. I could have ignored it. Should have. But I tapped. The video opened with laughter. My sister's voice, high-pitched and full of effort. Someone clinked a glass near the microphone, making everything spike. Then the camera turned. There it was. The living room I'd grown up in. Full lights. Big tree. My dad in his favorite flannel. Arlena in a red velvet sweater I'd bought her 2 Christmases ago. Everyone smiling. And on the far wall, the annual family photo. Except this year's was new. I wasn't in it. My spot, right side, second row, was filled by their golden retriever, Cooper, dressed in a tiny green sweater. The room erupted in giggles when someone asked, "Where's the baby girl?" Jolene chimed in from off-camera. "She's on sabbatical from the family, long overdue." Then she turned the camera on herself and winked. "Self-care season, right?" My hands didn't shake. I didn't gasp. I just watched, quiet, alert, as if studying a wildlife documentary about strangers who used to wear my last name. I took a screenshot, saved it to my desktop, renamed it Erasure. Scrolling through the comments, someone asked, "Is Venus coming later?" Jolene replied with a shrug emoji. No lies, no denials, just absence. And it hit me. Not only had I been cut out, I'd been replaced. Neatly. Like a broken hinge swapped out for a newer part. Nothing dramatic, just gone. I set my phone down and stood. Walked to the fridge. Opened it, stared for a while, then shut it. No appetite, just pressure behind my ribs. Then another buzz. A text from someone I hadn't heard from in months. Amy Chang. We used to serve together on a church outreach committee, back before the whole dynamic turned toxic. "Hey, I saw something today. Thought of you. Hope I'm wrong. Call me if you need to." Attached was a screenshot, a photo of Jolene at a leadership retreat. She stood in front of a projector screen with a title that read, "Removing Emotional Burdens. Boundaries for a Healthier Faith Family." Below that, a bullet point summary. And in one of those lines, Be mindful of family members who consistently require financial support without providing stability or peace. I read it twice. Then a third time. There it was. Packaged, sanitized, delivered with a microphone and applause. They didn't just erase me, they reframed me. I wasn't the one who showed up with checks and quiet labor. I was the emotional burden, the one they had to survive. I pulled the zip file from Dropbox, added the screenshot to a folder titled Narrative Control. No rage, just documentation. Then I opened my document labeled Contingency Plan. I added Screenshot Leadership Seminar, Record Stream Backup, Time Code 0817, Family Photo, Tag, Comments with emojis. I paused before closing the file. I am not a case study in dysfunction, I said aloud. The room absorbed it. No pushback, no rebuttal. The only audience was me, and that was enough. I reopened the Jolene video. This time, I turned the sound off and just watched. Faces I used to know. Gestures that had once included me, now seamless in their omission. Arlena raised a glass. To those who make life lighter. Greg, Jolene's husband, followed up. And to trimming the tree and the excess. Laughter again. Crisp, synchronized. I shut the stream. The screen went black. My reflection looked back. Unmoved. Walking to the printer, I grabbed the fresh stack of documents, pressed them flat, slipped the screenshot on top. On the back of the family photo, I wrote in ink, the year they made it official. The sound of the printer still echoed faintly in the hallway as I slipped the photo back into its folder and zipped it shut. I pushed the stack aside, picked up the envelope labeled Just for Taxes, and walked it over to the kitchen counter. For a long minute, I didn't move. The paper felt too light for how heavy it made my chest. I sliced it open with a butter knife and pulled out a folded document. As I smoothed it flat against the counter, my eyes landed on the bottom right corner. My name, in handwriting that only halfway resembled mine. Notarized, stamped, dated 8 months ago, power of attorney transfer. I hadn't signed this. My first instinct was to doubt myself. Had I signed something under pressure? Was it buried in some stack of papers during a visit when they just needed my help with a quick form? But the more I looked at the signature, the more certain I became. It was a forgery. Clean enough to fool an office, but sloppy in the way only someone who thinks you won't fight back would dare. I took out my phone and called the county assessor's office. A woman named Carla picked up. She sounded tired, polite. "Hi," I said. "I think I need to file a complaint regarding a fraudulent transfer." Pause. Then, as if she'd heard this 100 times before, "I can help with that. Are you in possession of the original will?" "Yes," I said, steady now, "and the forged document." "We'll start there," she said. "And Ms. Shipman, you're not the first. Don't let them talk you out of your own facts." I hung up and leaned against the sink. The room was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant city noise muffled behind my double-glazed windows. The next alert came through email. Not from Carla, from my title insurance company. Subject line, Change of Primary Ownership, Alert. I opened it, already knowing what I'd find. The name on the property, Jolene Ritzer, filed, processed, approved. I didn't know which made me angrier, the theft or how confidently it had been done. No discussion, no heads up, no, "Hey, we need to talk about the house." Just gone. I refreshed the inbox again, and that's when I saw it. Arlena. Subject, "Let's not ruin Christmas over paperwork." I clicked it open. "Venus, I know things feel out of sync lately, but this isn't the time to stir the pot. We've done our best, and I truly believe you're reading too much into everything. Please don't make this about legal documents. Let's keep the peace, especially during the holidays. With love, Mom." I reread it 3 times. No apology. No mention of what happened. Just a gentle tug toward silence. The kind of note people write when they know they're wrong, but would rather you swallow it than make them say it out loud. I closed the email and opened a new message. 2. Arlena Halderson, subject. Legal message. I will not speak to you again without a legal witness present. Venus, I hit send. Then I blocked her email. After that, I left the apartment. Took a walk around the block. Cold air, no coat. I needed it to bite a little. I needed to feel something real before I went back inside and started organizing what I knew would become a war. Not with screaming, but with signatures. When I returned, I opened a drawer in my desk and pulled out colored folders. Labeled each one. Fraud Inheritance Statements, Exhibit A. Birthright. By the time I was finished, the desk was a small archive. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel shaken. What I felt was something harder to name, like a slow flood under a house that hadn't been maintained. The kind of damage that takes years to show but ruins everything once it does. That night, I blocked the family group chat. Not out of spite, but because I didn't need the noise. I didn't want their half-jokes or passive-aggressive gifs or Jolene's sending good vibes that always felt like it came with a knife taped underneath. This wasn't about healing. It was about truth, boundaries, what belonged to me and what didn't, and what they'd tried to erase. The next day, I printed out the notarized will and placed it next to the forged power of attorney. The contrast was painful. One was careful, clean, signed with a pen I remembered Grandpa using. He always held it too tightly, and his signature slanted to the right. The other was crooked, rushed, impersonal. Arlena's language echoed in my head. Don't make this about documents. Of course, she didn't want it to be about documents, because paper doesn't lie the way people do. I called Carla back. I'm ready to submit the formal complaint, I said. Bring everything to the office on Tuesday, she replied. We'll file it directly. That evening, I bought a fireproof lockbox online. Overnight shipping. Paid extra for tracking. Then, I sat down at my laptop and added the last line to the top of my contingency plan. No more asking to be believed. From now on, I'll just show them. After I zipped the file and closed the laptop, I sat motionless for several minutes. The lights in the apartment had dimmed with the early winter dusk, but I hadn't noticed. Not until the hallway motion sensor flickered on outside my door and snapped me back to the moment. There was nothing else I could add to the documents, for now. But I wasn't done. I needed to see the damage in person, not on a screen, not through someone's email, not in screenshots. I needed to feel the space they'd rewritten me out of. The next morning, I got in my car before sunrise. No suitcase, no makeup, no call ahead. Just a folder in my passenger seat and a thermos of black coffee I barely sipped. The road to Fresno was quiet. A few trucks, a jogger at a rest stop, an old song from the 90s drifting faintly from a station I didn't usually listen to. 3 hours later, I pulled up to the curb in front of Grandpa's house. My house on paper, at least for a time. I hadn't been there in over a year. The driveway had a different car. The porch had a new potted plant. The mailbox had a sticker that read, "Deliveries okay to front door." I parked across the street. Watched for a few minutes. Then got out, walking slow like I had every right to be there. Which, by the way, I did. I rang the doorbell once. Waited. A girl in her early 20s answered, wrapped in a sweatshirt that swallowed her arms. Her hair was in a bun, earbuds dangling from her neck. "Hi," I said, keeping my voice even. "I'm with the city assessor, just doing some confirmation on recent transfer filings. Do you mind if I ask a few questions?" She blinked. Sure. You want to come in?" I stepped inside. Nothing looked broken, or strange, or hostile. The place was spotless, warm even. A candle burned on the console table. The same console I'd refinished with Grandpa one summer, sanding the legs by hand. I ran my fingers lightly across it, not to touch, just to see if I could feel the memory beneath the polish. She waved toward the living room. "My roommate's not home, but you can take a look around." I nodded, slow. The piano I'd donated to the house, still there. repainted white, now staged with a ceramic nativity set. The wall across from it had framed photos, one of Jolene handing a check to someone in a blazer, and Arlena beside her with a ribboned plaque. A printed banner beneath it read, "Donation made possible by the Ritzer Family Legacy Fund." I didn't flinch, but my molars clenched behind the smile I gave her. "Nice place," I said. She nodded. "Yeah, I think the owner's sister helped renovate it. She said the rest of the family doesn't come around anymore. Some weird drama, I guess." Of course she did. I thanked her and stepped outside. Back in the car, I didn't start the engine right away. I pulled the visor mirror down and just stared at myself. I didn't look furious. I looked finished. Back in Sacramento that evening, I sat at my kitchen table and opened the manila envelope Jolene had handed me earlier that year. "For tax season," she'd said. "Just keep it on hand in case you need it." I hadn't opened it, until now. Inside was a USB drive. Plain, no label. I plugged it into my laptop. One file. A scanned document titled Temporary Financial Authorization. I opened it. It was another power of attorney form. Different date, different formatting, same forged signature at the bottom, mine. This one wasn't even close. The spacing was off, the pen pressure inconsistent, a signature done by someone copying from memory, not reference. Sloppy, lazy, confident that I wouldn't check, that I wouldn't fight. I opened a separate window with my mortgage application from 2 years ago. Same name, different signature, clearly. Not just betrayal, not even just theft. This was identity fraud. Before I could decide what to do with it, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but I recognized the name. Evan, my ex. The one I'd dated through my late 20s. He worked in banking then, still did now. "Hey," I said, cautious. "Venus, long time. I didn't mean to catch you off guard," he said. "But I thought you should know. Your credit file's been accessed 6 times in the past 3 months." My spine straightened. 6? "Yeah," he confirmed. 3 were soft pulls, monitoring, but the other 3 were under what's labeled family guarantee purposes. That's internal language. It usually shows up when someone's co-signing or trying to leverage your file for a pending approval. My stomach turned. "I haven't co-signed anything," I said. "I figured. That's why I called. You might want to start locking down some things." I closed my eyes. "Thanks, Evan." He hesitated. "Do you need help? I've got a legal contact if you want someone to walk you through a cease and desist." "I already started, but I'll take the contact, just in case." We exchanged info. Hung up. I stared at the USB for a moment longer, then unplugged it and added it to the fraud folder I'd started the week before. Before bed, I opened my contingency plan and typed a new line. Prep cease and desist letter. Initiate credit freeze. Then, with a small sense of satisfaction, I renamed the digital folder where I was storing every scan, screenshot, and signed betrayal. Jolene, Vol and I clicked save. Not out of pettiness, out of preparation. I renamed the folder, Lineage Interruption, Defense Phase, and watched the cursor blink for a second before I closed the laptop. There was no part of me that felt satisfaction. Not yet. That would come later, if it ever did. Right now, it was just execution. Steps, documentation, forward motion. It was Friday evening when the email arrived. The subject line read, "Urgent, family meeting this weekend, attendance mandatory." I didn't bother replying. I clicked the attachment instead. A PDF, 6 bullet points long, 1 line bolded in red. Resolution of property dispute. That was the moment I knew they were scared. And that meant I wasn't too late. The meeting was scheduled for Sunday morning, downtown Fresno, at a small law office that Arlena had probably chosen to make it look professional, balanced, neutral. I drove down Saturday evening, checked into a modest hotel, and slept with 1 foot mentally out the door. By 9 a.m., I was in the building's lobby, hair tied back, blazer pressed, files zipped into a leather briefcase I'd bought the night before. I walked in 5 minutes late, on purpose. They were already seated. Jolene in a navy blouse and stiff posture, Arlena with a mug of something that probably wasn't her usual tea, and Greg beside them both, trying to look supportive but not stupid. A printed agenda sat at every chair. One section caught my eye right away. Request for voluntary release of claim, Venus Irene Shipman. They didn't even bother to disguise it. I pulled out the chair, sat down slowly, and slid the packet aside without opening it. Then I looked at them and said, "My lawyer's on the way. You can wait, or not." Jolene opened her mouth, closed it. Greg fidgeted. Arlena finally spoke. "We thought this would be less confrontational." I smiled tightly. "Did you?" They said nothing after that. After 5 long minutes of silence, I stood up, gathered my things, and left. I wasn't giving them a performance. I was giving them paperwork. Across the street, I found a coffee shop, sat near the window, opened my laptop. One by one, I sent the emails I'd been drafting for 2 days. To the county clerk, attaching copies of Grandpa's will and the forged documents, formally requesting a freeze on the disputed title. To the utility provider, revoking Jolene's authority to manage or modify any accounts under my name. To all 3 credit bureaus, requesting a fraud alert and placing a freeze on my credit activity. To my bank, instructing them to sever all shared access, effective immediately. No drama, no announcement, just legal, just clean. The digital door didn't slam, it sealed. By the time I finished my coffee, I had 4 automated responses and 1 live confirmation. The clerk's assistant, Carla, had escalated my complaint. She'd included a docket number in the email footer. I read it 3 times and saved the thread to the top of my inbox. That night, I drove home slowly, stopped for gas, listened to the quiet in my car, the kind of quiet that follows a storm but doesn't promise peace, only space to breathe. When I got home, I didn't unpack. I went straight to my laptop again and started logging every account still tied to my name. Jolene's Spotify family plan. Cancelled. Arlena's Amazon Prime profile. Deleted. Greg's insurance discount. Linked to my household code. Removed. No call, no warning, no, "Hey, just a heads up." They didn't give me that courtesy. I didn't owe it back. Every account I shut down made the silence around me louder. But it wasn't an empty kind of silence. It was the kind that builds pressure, the kind that rearranges the furniture inside your mind. The next morning, I woke up to a voice message from Jolene. I didn't even have to play it. I read the transcript instead. "You're really blowing this out of proportion. You've always been emotional about small things. It's just a house, Venus. You know Mom didn't mean anything by the way things were filed. You should have talked to us before going all nuclear." I clicked archive. Then I replied to Carla with the notarized will and the updated signature comparison file. Attached everything cleanly. Labeled the email, Phase 2 Documentation, Inheritance Retention. A few hours later, another message came in. Venmo transfer, $250. Just until next week? Mom? I stared at it. That same tired script. Guilt sandwiched between 2 acts of erasure. I didn't reject the transfer. I forwarded the notification to my fraud folder. Then I opened my financial tracker. Added a note. January 8th. Unauthorized request for funds via social app. Logged for pattern documentation. Before closing my laptop, I renamed the folder I'd created for everything since this began. It had started as evidence, then contingency plan, then Jolene Volai. Now? Lineage interruption, defense phase. I leaned back and looked out the window. Rain had started. Not a downpour, just steady, unrelenting drizzle. I didn't know what they were doing on their end, calling lawyers, texting cousins, spinning their version. But I knew one thing. They'd hear my side, whether or not I ever opened my mouth. I had just renamed the folder and closed my laptop when the alert popped up on my screen. An email from the county clerk's office. The subject line was short, matter of fact. Title ownership has been frozen pending fraud investigation. No drama, just confirmation. Cold, bureaucratic clarity. I let the words sit there for a moment. Then I leaned forward and opened a new tab. The cursor blinked as I filled out the final section of my legal statement. Requested resolution, full restitution, no contact. I clicked Submit. Before the page could finish reloading, my phone buzzed again. It wasn't from Mom or Jolene this time. The name on the screen belonged to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. A local reporter I used to know through community work, back when I still believed that helping behind the scenes mattered more than having your name on the banner. I ignored the call, but it didn't matter. A follow-up email arrived almost immediately. Subject: Ritzer Family Foundation. Verification request. Hi, Venus. I'd like to speak with you about recent inquiries into the Ritzer family grant trail. You're listed on several archived documents from the original land donation. Were you involved directly in the property ownership? We'd appreciate a comment. I didn't reply. I forwarded the email to my lawyer and added it to the media folder I'd created earlier that week. The folder wasn't large, yet. Then I turned back to my real task, launching the first public strike. I had spent the better part of 2 weeks collecting everything: PDFs of the will, scanned versions of the fraudulent deed, screenshots of group messages where I'd been erased, and records of credit pulls I never authorized. Now it was time to let them speak for themselves. The email I drafted was simple, clinical, and heavily structured. Subject: Notice of formal misrepresentation and title fraud, Ritzer family residence. Recipients: Extended Family, BCC. Church board members, the Community Grant Committee. A handful of regional reporters with verified inboxes. Attachments: Grandfather's will, certified. Timeline of property documents and fraud indicators. Credit abuse incidents with log timestamps. Screenshots of online posts denying my involvement, despite financial records proving otherwise. No editorializing, no melodrama, just receipts. I hit send at exactly 6:03 a.m. Then I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and went back to bed. When I woke at 6:17 a.m., I already had 63 missed calls. Arlena, Jolene, Greg, even my cousin Sarah, who hadn't reached out since 2015. The voicemails ranged from performative concern to open hostility. I can't believe you do this to your sister. She's humiliated, Arlena's message said, her tone brittle, like someone trying to cry and maintain her mascara at the same time. Jolene followed up in text form. Why are you trying to destroy everything we've built? As if the foundation hadn't been poured with stolen concrete. I didn't reply. I forwarded every call log, every voicemail, every text into a legal subfolder labeled Reactive Documentation, Post-Disclosure. It felt like watching a house of cards fall in slow motion, knowing you didn't knock it over, you just opened the window. By noon, the fallout had begun. My lawyer called to confirm the county clerk's team had reopened the investigation, not just into the property transfer, but also into the claimed charitable land use that had earned Jolene and Greg tax breaks and public praise. A few hours later, I got a ping from a church board member. Quiet, cautious. Hey, just wondering, did you really donate the property first? This isn't matching up with what we were told. I didn't answer him either. I didn't have to. That evening, I checked Jolene's social feed. Post after post vanished, gone. Deleted silently, no explanations. The family donation story, the retreat video, the photos of the Ritzer Legacy Fund gala, all wiped. Arlena responded the only way she knew how, posting a verse from Proverbs. A soft answer turns away wrath. That one made me laugh. Out loud. Just once. Meanwhile, Greg resigned from the Community Grant Board for personal reasons. Extended family members who had hearted every Christmas photo stopped commenting altogether. I didn't post anything. I didn't need to. I went to see the house one final time the next day. I didn't get out of the car. I parked across the street and watched as a man and his teenage daughter walked in, carrying groceries. Tenants, strangers. They belonged there more than I did. But as I rolled the window halfway down, I heard someone call from the yard next door. "Hey, you the girl who used to play piano over there?" I looked over. A woman with silver hair and gardening gloves. I nodded slowly. "I was." She smiled kindly. "Your music used to float all the way over here. Haven't heard any lately." I smiled back. "I still play, just not for them." She nodded. "Their loss." As I pulled away from the curb, my phone dinged once more. Email from the county clerk. Title, ownership, frozen, pending fraud investigation. I exhaled, deep and controlled. Then I drove home. Not victorious, just lighter. When I stepped inside the apartment, the first thing I did was slide the unopened card back into the mailbox slot. Arlena's handwriting was neat, as always. Like the message it carried might hold moral weight simply by being cursive. The front said, "Family is forgiveness." She had always been good at choosing platitudes over apologies. I let the envelope rest where someone else could find it. Let it go. Let it belong to a version of me that might have once opened it, squinted past the vagueness, and searched for something redeemable. I wasn't her anymore. Instead, I kicked off my shoes, placed my coat over the back of the chair, and walked to the desk. I opened my laptop, updated the contact tag on their numbers to legal only, no response unless court-ordered. Then I shut it, poured myself a glass of water, and checked my phone. A message from Amy had come through, my old friend from church. "Venus, you need to see this." Attached was a clip from an Instagram story, one of Jolene's, or someone in her echo chamber. It was a short video, obviously meant for a curated audience, but this time, someone had failed to restrict the viewers list. I hit play. The camera panned across a dimly lit table, laughter already spilling into the audio. Someone said, "Venus really thought she'd get a seat at the table?" Followed by more laughter. Then a woman added, "She's the kind of person who brings paper plates and wants a throne." The room cackled. Jolene appeared on screen for a second, champagne in hand, lips painted like she was headed to war. She didn't say anything, just lifted the glass and shrugged. Then the video cut out. I saved it to my folder, renamed the file, Closure. I didn't flinch. I didn't rewatch it. I didn't forward it. I just let it sit. A final confirmation, not an injury. They hadn't made a mistake. They hadn't forgotten me. They had deliberately written me out and made jokes about the ink. And that, strangely, made things easier. Later that evening, I opened the audio file from Grandpa again. I hadn't listened to it since the first time. This time, I just let it play, while I sat with my back against the wall and watched the shadows lengthen across the room. His voice was calm, grounded. "If they ever decide you don't count," he said, "I want you to have the land. Not for shelter, but for freedom." There was a beat of silence, a sound of him exhaling through his nose. "You were always the clean page, Venus, the one I didn't want the world to smudge." I closed my eyes. The hum of the fridge behind me, the faint wind outside, and his voice. That was all I needed for the moment. When the recording ended, I stood up and pulled out the envelope from the fireproof box. The deed. My name still printed on it, despite all they'd done to strip it away. I knew what I had to do next. The following morning, I made an appointment with a nonprofit downtown, one that built transitional housing for girls aging out of foster care. I'd volunteered there years ago, quietly, filing forms, organizing hygiene kits, making coffee. The director, Mrs. Hopewell, greeted me at the door. She was still wearing the same oversized glasses and floral scarves I remembered. She hugged me before I could explain anything. I sat in her office with the deed across my lap, papers in hand. I told her I wanted to donate the property. No press, no fundraiser, no story. Just bricks. Just shelter. Just freedom for someone else. She nodded slowly. "We don't need your name on the plaque," she said. "But if it's all right, I'd like to put your grandfather's name on the front bench, for the girls to sit and breathe." I looked at the papers again, then signed. I passed her the folder and let go of it like it weighed nothing, when in truth, it had pressed on me for years. On my walk back to the car, I didn't check my phone. I didn't feel the need to. There was nothing left they could say that would shift what had already been decided. That evening, I baked lasagna. Not for an audience, not for a holiday, not to win back favor or fill a void. Just because it was Grandpa's favorite. I lit a candle. Not the expensive kind, just one that smelled like pine and memory. I set 2 forks on the table, one in front of me and one across. Then I served both plates and ate them in silence. It was December 26th. There was no tree this year, no gifts, no cards I wanted to open. But I felt more whole than I had in a long time. I wasn't waiting to be welcomed back. I was building something that never needed their approval to stand. As I rinsed the last plate and set it on the drying rack, I passed the mailbox one more time on my way upstairs. The card was gone. Someone had taken it, or the wind had claimed it. Either way, it didn't belong to me. Not anymore. Upstairs, I slipped off my shoes, padded across the wood floor, and opened my notebook. The same one I'd used to track bills and loan payments and birthdays once upon a time. Now, it held a different kind of inventory, truths I had stopped asking anyone else to carry with me. I wrote one line on a sticky note and pressed it to the mirror in my bedroom. You were always enough, even when they said you weren't. 2 days later, I received an update from my attorney. Clean, efficient, like everything else she did. Title restoration confirmed. Fraud documented and sealed. Restitution formalized. No criminal prosecution at this time, per your earlier preference. All rights retained. No further contact advised. I read it over my second cup of coffee that morning. The wording didn't hold warmth, but it did hold weight. I whispered to myself, good. There was no announcement made, no court hearing to attend, no spectacle, just resolution, quietly filed in the systems that had once failed to see me. Jolene resigned from her board role 3 days later. No explanation given, but the people who'd once clapped when she spoke didn't ask questions. Arlena stepped away from the church committee she'd chaired for 12 years. No statement, just silence, padded by absence. Greg lost his position on the advisory panel at his firm. Someone on their internal ethics committee had raised concerns after the donation records and title discrepancies surfaced. No one accused him outright, but that's how institutions deal with shame. They don't name it, they isolate it. I didn't rejoice. It wasn't a win, not in the way movies teach you to wait for. It was simply complete. One afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't pick up. No voicemail followed. Just a missed call that hung there, unspoken. And I didn't wonder who it was. I already knew. I sat by the window and watched the clouds roll in. I used to think not answering made me cold, I murmured, but really, it just makes me free. By the time New Year's Eve arrived, my calendar was still empty, and that felt right. No obligatory check-ins, no half-hearted invites to pop by for a quick drink, no photos to scroll through and pretend I wasn't bothered. Instead, I picked up 2 boxes of breakfast burritos and walked them to the community center 4 blocks down. When I stepped inside, one of the staffers lit up. "Venus, you came!" "I said I would," I said, shrugging off my coat. "Happy New Year." The room was full of volunteers, most of them retired, some in their 20s, others clearly just trying to stay warm and useful. A girl, maybe 15, eyes sharp with exhaustion, looked at me and asked, "Do you do this every year?" I paused before answering. "I do now." We spent the morning filing tax prep folders for newly settled refugee families. Simple forms, basic arithmetic, but the kind of thing that made a world of difference to someone starting over with nothing but a rental receipt and an expired driver's permit. At noon, we had sandwiches and lukewarm coffee. The teen girl from earlier sat next to me. She didn't ask about my family. No one there did. And for once, I didn't need to explain myself. Later that evening, I returned home to a quiet apartment. No party, no countdown. Just the hum of the radiator and the rustle of a city winding down for the year. I made a cup of mint tea, sat at the kitchen table, and flipped to a blank page in my notebook. Across the top, I wrote, New Traditions, and underneath, January 1st. Breakfast donation, February 14th. Call no one out of guilt, March 6th. Piano lesson for self only, April 10th. Visit a place where no one knows your name. I didn't list resolutions. I listed boundaries, rituals for no one but me. And then I did one more thing. I set a single chair across from mine. No centerpiece, no wine glass, no need for a plate this time. I just sat with myself, not because I had to, because I chose to. The silence didn't ache anymore.